How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. This is Dr. Robert Berghorn, physical therapist and owner of Ascent Physical Therapy here on Long Island, New York. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a little topic that's been coming up a lot lately, or at least something I've been seeing out in the community and also in my clinic, where a lot of people are either, not necessarily a lot of people, but at the same time, a lot of people that I'm seeing are dealing with contusions or bruising or from falls or trips or stumbles while they're running, or I'm just getting asked by people about what do I do about tingling in my pinky. Now, this is something that, is something that can be something very innocuous, something that is not very intrusive to some people, but sometimes it can be very intrusive to others. Like one person I was working with today, where they were dealing with issues with gripping and lifting and also opening jars while either at work or at home. So this is something that can be something that, if not taken care of, can be very intrusive and can be very restrictive as far as what you're able to do during your day. So let's get into it. So what is that? What is it, and how is it affecting you? So basically, any tingling that you get in your pinky, it can be from a number of different things. Our nerves, they come from our neck, they come from our spine, they come from our lower back, and basically they travel all the way down to the tips of our fingers, the tips of our toes, and anywhere in between. And at any point during that pathway, it can get affected, it can get pinned down, it can get restricted, it can have some trauma applied to it, depending on what is going on. So basically, as we go through that, we have to, as a physical therapist or as a doctor, we need to be able to figure out where it's exactly coming from. If we don't figure it out exactly where it's coming from, it can be something that can linger for a period of time, especially if you don't get to the direct cause. However, how can you at home be able to determine how and when it is appropriate to get fixed or adjusted or worked with a professional like myself, a doctor of physical therapy, in order to help alleviate any of your pain or symptoms? So one thing is to figure out whether you're dealing with any neck pain. If you don't necessarily have any neck pain, if you're not having any of your symptoms in your hand, your pinky, your forearm affected, as if you are moving your neck around or anything in between, if you're not having any issues with that, it may not be coming from your neck. If you're dealing with shoulder pain or shoulder dysfunction, it may come from that as well. It is something that, if you notice, especially as you're either laying on your side with your arm overhead, or as if you're a side sleeper, you lay on your side like this, and it affects the way that your pinky feels, it may be something that's coming from your shoulder. If you're noticing that only your symptoms reside from your elbow down to your pinky as you're going through, it may be coming from there as well. Or only if you're noticing symptoms that are coming from the bottom of your wrist here all the way to the tip of your pinky, it may be something going on in your wrist. So it is very small things that you need to be able to do in order to tease that out, but it is simple in that regard. So how do we first, not only do we figure out where it's coming from, but then also now we have to figure out what to do about it. If, for example, it's coming from your shoulder, you may need to work on posture. You may need to work on strength and stability of your shoulder due to some compensations you may be making. The same thing goes for your neck. If you're dealing with decreased mobility, if you can't turn your head all the way one side compared to the other, if you can't sit upright with your shoulders retracted, or if you're dealing with postural issues as far as like you're rounded over a little bit, you may be dealing with some compression through there as well. If you are dealing with some kind of contusion, if you fall on that direct area, if you fall on your elbow and you have some bruising around there, there's some swelling, there's some inflammation, that may take a little bit while for that to calm down and something to alleviate from there. And you may be dealing with some kind of tightness, restriction, either due to some compensation that you're making in your wrist and forearm because you have some weakness in your shoulder. So those are all different things of where things can come from specifically, but it is something that can be easily adjusted. Now, tonight we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about what's going on from elbow down to the hand. Just because it is something that, if you are dealing with a lot of gripping, if you're doing a lot of gripping activities, if you, for example, are a cyclist and you're dealing with, if you're in the aero position, you're riding a lot and you have pressure on your forearm and you're dealing with some pinky tingling or some tenderness in your elbow as you're riding, this is something that can be very intrusive. So it's very simple in this case. Basically, the ulnar nerve will travel anywhere from this little tip of that bone at the base of your elbow here. It'll go and run underneath that. It'll come all the way down along the inside of your bone here, and it'll run all the way through and into your wrist here. Now, your wrist here is made up of multiple bones. There's 8 bones in the wrist, and basically there's a small tunnel where that nerve runs through. And basically, if you have any tightness in your forearm, if you have any tightness in your pinky on the outside of your hand or the inside of your hand here, you will have some compression because one of those bones will be a little bit manipulated or will move and cinch down, compressing that nerve. And sometimes you can get tingling or you can get some pain down into your pinky and sometimes even into your forearm where you have either some kind of burning pain or you have some of that numbness, that tingling. So basically, as we go through, and we can start touching a little bit of the muscle as we go along the bone here. So that we have that bone on the outside here called your ulna. We have some tightness, some restriction within the elbow. We notice that there's a little bit of tenderness in there. You may be dealing with some restriction within the muscle itself that could be compressing down on that nerve. The same thing goes into the pinky or the forearm on the part of the hand here. If you're noticing any tenderness that is on the outside of the hand, any of the muscles that are in this part of the hand over here, if you're noticing any tenderness, especially as we get down to the base of the hand here where we have one of our bones, if you're noticing either any symptoms reproduce as you're pushing around and compressing around there, you may be noticing that there is some of that tingling or replication of your symptoms. If you're dealing with any of that, that may be something that needs to be addressed. So what can you do about it? So there's a couple of things that you can do about it, and some things I like to give my clients just to help relieve things as we're kind of going between sessions, as we're going to be able to progress from a painful elbow or a painful hand to something that's a little bit more uncomfortable, to something that is not painful, to something that you don't have to deal with again. So there's always that journey as we go along this process, and it's always something that goes along with any kind of issue, problem, or injury. So as we go through, there's a couple things that we can do. So we can do massage. So you can either massage it out yourself like I'm doing right now and just work on the tight areas and restrictions throughout your forearm. You can also work on any tight restrictions that are on the inside of your hand right here, right down by your pinky. You can work any of those muscles out for any of the restrictions that you have. You can do that for about 5 minutes. If you feel like you're not doing that great of a job with your hands, what you can do is you can take a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball and you can just put it up against a surface and you can put your arm on top of it and you can roll that tennis ball, that lacrosse ball along this muscle as it goes along here. And as that muscle loosens up and as you get less restrictions in there, you may notice that you don't have as much of a symptomatic pinky, or you may not notice that you have as much of a nerve pain as we run down here, that burning pain that I was talking about earlier. And one last thing that you can do, especially if you're dealing with if you're still having continued issues, even though you're not noticing any tightness or any restrictions on the inside of your forearm here or on the inside of your hand, what you can do is what's called nerve flossing. So nerve flossing is something where we're having appropriate movement of your nerves as they go from your neck all the way down to your shoulder. And they're supposed to move, they're supposed to roll, they're supposed to glide, they're supposed to stretch. So if they're not stretching, they're not moving appropriately, if they're getting bound down by some kind of restriction along its pathway, basically one thing you can do is I'm going to slide back here, and you can start with your hand elevated here. You're going to turn so that your palm faces away. You're going to bring your elbow as close to your head as you can without any symptoms. And you're going to then extend your wrist, so bringing your back of your hand as close to your shoulder as you can. If you notice that you start to get a little bit of a stretch, that's okay. Any kind of stretch along outside of that pinky and into the forearm, that's okay. You want to hold that there for a little bit, back off, come back in a little bit, back off. You can repeat that for about a minute. If you notice that any of that alleviates and you don't have as much of that stretch anymore, what you can do from that point is hold that position, and then you can start tilting your head away from where your hand is. By tilting your head away from where your hand is, you can notice that stretch comes back, and you notice that you may get a little bit of reproduction of some of your symptoms. If you're getting reproduction of it, don't do as far, don't go as far, or bring your hand back into a more neutral position, and then you can start going back and forth again. And again, repeat that over and over until you start feeling like you're able to either bring your elbow up higher, or if you're able to go further with your head. If you're able to do any or either of those are benefits as far as improving any of that ability for your nerve to move and glide the appropriate way, so you have less pain and less dysfunction during your day. I hope this was helpful for you guys tonight. If you guys would like to speak with me about this, any kind of elbow, hand, or wrist pain that you've been dealing with, or any kind of nerve pain that you've been dealing with, whether it is the inside of your hand by your pinky, or if it's any other part of your hand, you're having issues with that, especially if you are dealing with it in your daily life or in your recreational life by being unable to go into your gym or be unable to ride your bicycle, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to sit down, discuss with you, and figure out what is the root cause of your issue and get you back to doing what you've been missing out on. If you do want to reach out to me, you have the phone number above, you have my email above, or you can comment down below my poor hand, and I'd be more than happy to touch base with you and get in touch and figure out what is best for you. Until next time, I'll see you guys next Tuesday for Tactical Tuesday. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Have a good night.